This is Heliox, where evidence meets empathy. Independent, moderated, timely, deep, gentle, clinical, global, and community conversations about things that matter. Breathe easy, we go deep and lightly surface the big ideas.
I'm so glad you're here with us.
Yeah.
Today I want to start by asking you to do something a little strange. I want you to just, for a second, close your eyes and picture the timeline of human history.
Okay, got it.
Imagine it as this long, physical line stretching out your mind. Now, when we usually populate that line, we fill it with the loud stuff, right?
The big things.
Exactly, the big things. We think of the pyramids of Giza rising out of the sand. We think of Roman legions marching in perfect lockstep. We see these massive hordes of gold jewelry pulled from a king's tomb, or, the terracotta army in China.
It's the history of the monumental.
Yes, it's the history of the big, the heavy, the things that were basically built to scream across the centuries, I was here, I was powerful, and I mattered.
And that really is the cinematic version of history, isn't it? It's the blockbuster movie trailer. It's what we put in museums precisely because it's what survives. But if you actually get down into the dirt, and I mean literally into a trench with a trowel in your hand, you realize that the archaeological record is overwhelmingly silent.
Silent.
It's not made of pyramids, it's made of trash, it's made of broken little bits of nothing, organic decay, and these vast empty spaces where people used to be.
It's the invisible majority.
Exactly. And that silence becomes absolutely deafening when we start to look for a very specific group of people, the very, very young. And I don't just mean children or toddlers, I mean the unborn.
The most fragile.
Biologically, they're the most fragile element of the entire human story. Their bones are tiny. I mean, often there's still cartilage that hasn't even ossified, hasn't turned to bone yet. The soil is acidic. The weight of the earth is heavy. They dissolve. They disappear.
So for centuries of archaeology, the history of how our distant ancestors treated the unborn, how they grieved them, or if they even counted them as people, that's just been a blank page. We sort of assumed we couldn't know.
Until you find the exception, until the chemistry and the culture align in just the right way to preserve what should have been lost. And that is exactly what we are digging into today.
And it's a fascinating one.
It is. We have this incredible new study focused on a site in northwestern Iran called Chaparabad. And the headline isn't some golden idol or a king's sword, it's a jar. Or, to be more precise, 2 jars. And inside those jars, preserved against all the odds for 6,500 years, are the remains of 2 fetuses.
This is what I love about this particular deep dive. We are not looking at kings or generals. We're looking at a kitchen floor in a prehistoric village. We're going to try and decode what these tiny 6,500-year-old burials can tell us about how prehistoric people viewed life, death, and the unborn.
And in doing that, we're shifting the focus from, just studying pottery to studying the people inside the pottery.
Which is such a profound shift, isn't it?
It is. It's bioarchaeology at its absolute most intimate.
So let's set the scene for everyone. Where are we exactly? If I were to drop a pin on a map, where does it land?
Okay, you are landing in the West Azerbaijan province of Iran. Specifically, you're about 8 kilometers, so 5 miles or so, southeast of a town called Oshnavia. This is the Chaparabad archaeological site.
And geographically, what does that area look like?
It's a fascinating area. It sits just south of Lake Urmia.
Oh, Lake Urmia. That's the massive salt lake, right? I've seen pictures.
That's the one. It's a really crucial landmark in the region. And this whole area, the Oshnavia Plain, is part of the Zagros mountain sphere. So you have to picture these fertile plains nestled within a mountainous landscape.
So it's not isolated.
Not at all. It has always been a corridor,
Yeah.
a highway for movement, for migration, for culture. I mean, if you wanted to move between the Mesopotamian lowlands, the cradle of civilization, and the high Iranian plateau, you very often came through here.
So the people living at Chaparabad, they weren't living in a bubble.
Absolutely not. They were at a cultural crossroads. They were seeing people, goods, and ideas constantly passing through.
And looking at our timeline, you said mid-5th millennium BCE. So we're talking about 6,500 years ago, give or take.
Yes. And just to give you some context, this isn't just a random date on the calendar. This specific period is a moment of really intense transition. In this part of northwestern Iran, archaeologists divide the fifth millennium into two distinct horizons or cultures.
Okay, let's unpack that term, because horizon sounds very abstract. What does that actually mean for the people who were living there day to day?
Think of it as a cultural package. It's their style of pottery, their architecture, their tools, maybe even their language. It's their whole way of life. And the first half of the millennium is dominated by what we call the Dolma culture.
Calma.
I mean, the Dalma culture is designed very heavily by its ceramics. If you're an archaeologist digging and you find a pot with these complex geometric paintings on a cream background, or you find these pots where the wet clay has been impressed with fingers or tools to create this unique texture,
You know where you are.
you know you are in Dalma territory. They were agriculturalists, they were herders, living in these relatively small settlements.
And then what happens?
Then, in the second half of the millennium, things start to change. It transitions into what we call the Pizdeli culture, and this seems to be a new influence, likely connected to the Ubaid culture that was expanding out of Mesopotamia.
So new people or just new ideas?
Probably a bit of both. It brings new pottery styles, these black on buff wares, and potentially new social structures, new ways of organizing society.
So we have the Dalma, which is the old way, and then the Pizdeli, the new way, comes in.
Exactly. And the burials we're going to discuss today sit right at that intersection. They are likely from that crucial transition period. So by studying them, we aren't just looking at a static moment in time, we are looking at a society in flux.
They were living through a kind of slow-motion cultural revolution.
A very slow motion one, yes. Potentially shifting from one set of cultural norms to another.
So we have a physical crossroads near Lake Aremia and a temporal, a time-based crossroads between these two cultures. And the mission today is to look at these two specific jars found in this exact context.
Yes, and I really want to emphasize again how unbelievably rare this is. As I said, fetal bones almost never survive. But in this excavation, which was conducted very recently between 2021 and 2023, the team uncovered something that, well, forensic anthropologists would call a miracle.
All right, let's get into that. Segment 1, the discovery and the forensic miracle.
So the excavators are at work at Chaparabad. They open up a trench the feet specifically, and they start to uncover about 310 square meters of architectural space. They're finding walls made of what's called shina. It's a kind of layered, mud-beaten earth floors, the basic footprint of a settlement.
Which in itself is pretty standard archaeology,
Yeah.
right? You find a wall, you find a floor. That's the job.
That's the job. And within this space, they start finding ceramic vessels. Now, usually you find a pot, you wash it, you catalog it as storage jar type B, and you move on. Most pots are for grain, for water, maybe for brewing beer.
But these were different.
These pots were different. They were coffins.
And not just coffins for anyone.
No. They contained the remains of fetuses. Now, under normal circumstances, if you were lucky enough to find a burial like this from 6,500 years ago, you might find a few fragments, maybe a tooth bud, which are very dense, maybe the shaft of a tiny femur. The soil usually wins. But the first specimen they found, which was labeled L522.1, well, it was shocking.
How shocking. How intact was it?
It was 90% intact.
Wow. 90%. For a fetus, that feels impossible.
It is statistically just unheard of for this region and this era. And what that allowed the researchers to do was something they almost never get to do with prehistoric fetal remains. They could apply rigorous quantitative science. They didn't just have to look at it and say, well, it looks like a baby. They could measure it.
I was reading this part of the report, and the level of detail is just obsessive. They use mechanical vernier calipers.
With an accuracy to 0.05 millimeters. We are talking about measuring the thickness of bones that are thinner than a pencil lead. It's incredibly precise work.
And they took how many measurements on that first one?
For that first burial, L522.1, they took 305 separate quantitative measurements.
305. On a single tiny skeleton.
They measured every long bone, the femur, the humerus, the cranial dimensions, the pelvic bones, absolutely everything they could. And for the second burial, which was labeled L815.1, they were able to take 165 measurements. It was slightly less preserved, but still an absolutely incredible data set.
But why so many? Is this just, data for data's sake? Or does it tell you something specific?
Oh, no, this is how we determine age. It's absolutely crucial. In adults, we might look at the wear and tear on teeth or the fusion of joints to guess an age. But in fetuses, Growth is a very, very predictable clock. We know with a high degree of certainty how long a femur should be at 20 weeks, at 30 weeks, at 40 weeks.
It's a standard growth chart, basically.
It is. So by plugging these 305 measurements into what are called regression formulas, which are basically just mathematical models of human growth, they could pinpoint the age at death with incredible precision.
And this is where the story gets really heavy, I think, because the word fetus is a very broad term. Are we talking about an early pregnancy? Late pregnancy?
And that's the key question. The measurements of the long bones and other skeletal indicators all pointed to the same conclusion. Both of these individuals were preterm. Specifically, they were between 36 and 38 weeks of gestational age.
36 to 38 weeks. I mean,
Yeah.
for anyone listening who has had children or knows anything about pregnancy, that's right there. That is basically full term.
It is. Today, a baby born at 36 weeks is considered just a little early. They usually do just fine with some care. These were fully formed infants, essentially ready to be born.
So these weren't early miscarriages where the pregnancy might not have even been visible to the wider community.
No, absolutely not. These were individuals that the parents, the mother in particular, had carried for nearly 9 months. They were expected members of the community. The mother was visibly pregnant. The village, the family, they knew these babies were coming.
And the tragedy of that loss.
Yeah.
I mean, losing a child days or weeks before they're supposed to arrive, that's a very specific kind of grief.
It is. And what we see at Chaparabad is the physical evidence of how that grief was processed, how it was handled.
Which leads us directly to the vessel itself. Why a pot? I mean, we see this in movies, the idea of an urn, but that's usually for ashes, for cremated remains. These are bodies. So why would you bury a fetus in what looks like a cooking pot or a storage jar? Is it just pragmatism? Like they didn't have wood for a coffin?
That's the pragmatic view, and sure, on one level, a pot is a convenient, rigid container that protects the body, but anthropologists, and certainly the authors of this study, argue that there is something much deeper going on here. It's a concept that's often called the pot as womb.
The pot is womb. Okay, let's unpack that. That's a powerful image.
Think about the shape of a typical ceramic vessel in the Chalcolithic period. It has a rounded belly, it has a restricted neck or mouth, it holds things that are precious and life-sustaining, water, grain, oil.
It kind of looks like a pregnant belly.
It absolutely does. Many researchers have proposed this very direct symbolic analogy between the ceramic vessel and the female body. Structurally, it functions like one. It encloses and protects the contents.
So burying the fetus in the jar isn't just about finding a convenient box.
It's likely a deeply ritual act of return. You are taking this life that came from the womb, and because it didn't survive to fully enter the world of the living, you are symbolically returning it to a womb, a permanent ceramic womb.
That is deeply poetic. It's like they're saying, this child isn't ready for the earth yet, so we're putting them back in the vessel.
Precisely. It could be an attempt to reverse the process of a failed birth, or maybe to protect the soul in a way that the biological body couldn't be protected. It's a technology of death, if you will, designed specifically to handle a life that never quite got started.
And what's really fascinating is that the researchers point out this isn't just something happening at Chaparabad. This isn't one eccentric family 6,500 years ago with a strange idea.
No, this was a trend. It was a shared language of death that spanned a massive geographic area and a huge amount of time. The paper lists parallels all over Southwest Asia.
Yeah, I was looking at that list. It's extensive. It really drives the point home.
We're talking about Tepe Sialk in central Iran. We're talking about Tel Es-Salwan along the Tigris River in modern Iraq. Sites in Syria like Tel Halula and Tel Zaydan, Tepe Gara in northern Iraq.
So from the Fertile Crescent, the heartland of Mesopotamia, all the way across the Zagros Mountains to the Iranian plateau.
Exactly. For thousands of years, starting in the Neolithic period and going right through the Chalcolithic people in this part of the world were doing this. They were burying their unborn and sometimes infants in jars.
Which suggests a shared cosmology, or at least a shared understanding of what a fetus is and where it belongs after death.
Yes. It connects these otherwise disparate villages. They might have spoken different dialects or had different local gods or certainly different pottery styles for their daily use, but they seem to have agreed on where the babies go.
That connectivity is crucial. It shows this was a deeply embedded cultural idea.
It was. But, and here's where it gets really, really interesting. Even within the shared tradition, there are differences. And the two burials at Chaparabad, even though they are at the same site and from roughly the same time, are treated very, very differently.
This is the tale of two burials, because at first glance, they seem identical. Two babies, same age, 36, 38 weeks, both placed in jars. But when you look closer, the details, they tell two completely different stories.
Let's look at the first one again, burial L522.1. We can call this one the kitchen burial.
The kitchen burial, why? What does that mean?
It's because of where it was found. It wasn't in a separate cemetery. It was located below the floor of an architectural space that the archaeologists interpreted as a kitchen.
Wait, you mean literally under the kitchen floor?
Yes, exactly. They cut a pit into the floor, placed the burial jar inside, and then sealed the floor back over it.
So the family is in there, cooking, eating, preparing food, living their daily lives, walking right over the spot where this infant is buried.
Precisely. And that speaks volumes about a desire to keep the child close. The kitchen is the heart of the home, isn't it? It's the source of warmth, of fire, of sustenance. Burying the child there integrates them into the ongoing life of the family.
That feels, it's unsettling to a modern mind. We separate the dead. We have cemeteries. We put up fences.
Yeah.
We don't, put grandma under the living room rug.
We definitely don't. But that is a very modern, very Western sanitization of death. In many prehistoric societies, and even some historical ones, keeping the dead close was a way of keeping them in the family, of continuing that relationship.
Especially for a baby.
Especially for a baby. Think about it. This child never got to join the community. They never walked. They never spoke. By burying them in the kitchen, you are keeping them in the warmest, most active, most nurturing part of the house. You are, in a way, integrating them into the daily life of the mother.
They're being kept in the domestic sphere, not cast out.
Exactly. They aren't cast out into the cold wilderness or a distant cemetery. They are held in the warmth of the home. But the thing that really stood out to me about the kitchen burial wasn't just its location. It was what else was in the jar.
The grave goods.
The grave goods. This is the smoking gun for social complexity. This jar was not empty of everything but the skeleton. It also contained the bones of ovicaprids.
Ovicaprids.
Sheep or goats.
So they buried the baby with food.
Likely, yes. But here's the specific detail that gave me pause when I read it. The jar itself was placed atop a deposit of butchered animal remains.
Whoa, hold on. So they dug the hole in the kitchen floor, they put in pieces of butchered meat like a feast or a big offering, and then they placed the coffin jar on top of that.
That is the archaeological interpretation, yes. And inside the jar, with the fetus, there were also bones from various parts of the animal. This strongly implies a ritual meal or a sacrifice. This fetus, who never took a breath, was sent away with provisions for the afterlife. Or perhaps the family held a feast in its honor and buried the remnants with the child.
We have to talk about the economics of that. 6,500 years ago, you're a subsistence farmer. You don't have a supermarket down the road. A sheep is your wool, it's your milk, it's your breeding stock for next year. Killing a sheep and burying the meat that's expensive.
It is a massive investment. It represents a significant destruction of wealth. You are taking valuable calories and resources out of circulation and giving them to the dead. And that tells us something profound, that this child, this unborn, unnamed individual, had value, high value.
They were worth the cost of a sheep.
They were worth the cost of a sheep. Now contrast that with the second burial, burial L815.1.
It's a granary burial.
A granary burial, yeah.
And it was found adjacent to a grain storage facility.
That's right. So again, there's this association with food and sustenance, which is interesting, but it's a different context. A granary is more communal, maybe less personal than a kitchen, but the starkest difference is what was inside the jar.
Let me guess. No sheep bones.
Nothing. No grave goods, no offerings, no animal bones, just the skeleton.
And just to remind everyone, these are from the same time, the same place, and the fetuses are the same age, both 36, 38 weeks, both in jars. But one gets this elaborate feast, and the other gets nothing.
It just raises so many questions, doesn't it? Is this a straightforward difference in wealth? Was the first family the elite of the village, the ones who could afford a sheep sacrifice, while the second family was poor and couldn't?
Or could it be something else? Could it be about the circumstances of the death?
That's another very real possibility. Maybe the first baby was a long-awaited firstborn, maybe a son in a society that valued sons, and so the ritual was more elaborate. Maybe the second burial had to be done in haste for some reason. We can't know for sure, but the inequality in death is undeniable.
It is so striking to think about social inequality, starting that early. We talk about privilege and status in the modern world, but here, before these humans even lived a single day, their treatment in death was radically different.
It completely challenges our sort of romantic assumptions about egalitarian prehistoric societies. We often have this idea that before big cities and empires, everyone was equal. But here, In the silent vessels of Chaparabad, we see distinction. We see choices being made.
I keep thinking about that granary burial, though. It's
Yeah.
easy to look at the sheep burial and say, wow, look how much they cared. But what about the other one? Does the lack of goods mean they cared less?
I don't think so. I think we have to be careful not to project our own values onto it. Think about the location, the granary.
The grain store.
In a farming community, the granary is the bank. It is the future. It is life itself. It's the promise of survival through the winter. If you bury your child next to the grain, you are still associating them with abundance, with life, even if you can't afford to put a sheep in the jar.
So the location itself becomes the offering.
Exactly. It's a symbolic act. May you always be near the grain. It's a blessing. So perhaps the inequality we're seeing isn't about love or grief. Perhaps it's about resources. But the intent, the desire to protect, to provision, to return the child to a safe place, that seems to be the same.
Want to pivot back to the pottery itself for a minute, because the expert listening to this, the archaeologist, might be saying, okay, the bones are cool, but what about the jars? Archaeologists love their pottery types.
They do, and for good reason. Pottery is the clock of the ancient world. It's what allows us to build chronologies to know when we are, but it also tells us about culture, about identity.
So what kind of jars were these specifically?
The vessels that were used for these two burials were characteristic of the Dalma culture.
Dolma. Okay, so that's the earlier horizon, the old way we mentioned.
Right. Dalma pottery is known for very specific styles. There's Dalma impressed ware, where they press patterns into the wet clay, and Dalma red slip, where they coat the pot in this rich red pigment. The burial jars fit this description perfectly.
But didn't you say they found other types of pottery nearby?
Yes, and this is the absolute key to the dating and the cultural interpretation. In the very same architectural spaces, right alongside these Dalma burials, they recovered Pizdeli ware.
The later stuff, the new style that was coming in.
Exactly.
Hmm.
So what you have is Dalma jars, the old traditional style, being used for a very specific, very important purpose in a context where the new style, Pizdeli pottery, is already starting to appear in daily life.
So it's like, let me try an analogy. Imagine a modern house. We have smart TVs and iPhones and all the latest gadgets, the Pizdeli stuff. But when a relative passes away, maybe we use an old wooden chest that belonged to our great-grandparents to bury the ashes, for the Dalma stuff.
That is a perfect analogy. It's the grandmother's china effect. You use it for special occasions.
Why do people do that? Why stick to the old ways for something so important?
Because ritual is conservative. It's inherently backward-looking. Fashion changes fast. Technology changes fast. Oh, look, the neighbors have the new painted bowls from Mesopotamia. Let's get some. That can change overnight, but death. Death is scary. Death is sacred. You don't experiment with burial rites. You do what your ancestors did because you want to make sure it works.
You want to do it right.
Exactly. You don't want to mess it up. So even though the village of Chaparabad was transitioning to the Pizdeli lifestyle in their day-to-day, when it came to the burial of these precious infants, they stuck to the Dolma traditions. They used the Dolma pots.
Which suggests that the spiritual beliefs of the Dalma culture held on longer than their kitchenware did.
That's a great way to put it. It shows that culture change isn't a simple replacement. It's not like flipping a switch. It's a blend, a negotiation. New ideas are adopted, but old traditions, especially those tied to life and death, can be very, very resilient.
That makes total sense. We still have traditions around funerals and weddings that feel ancient, even in our super modern world.
Precisely. So these two little burials, they serve as a bridge. They help archaeologists understand how that major cultural shift actually played out on the ground in northwestern Iran. It wasn't an overnight replacement. It was a hybridization.
I want to zoom out a bit as we get toward the end here. We've looked at the bones, the kitchen, the sheep, the pots. But why does a study like this really matter in the grand scheme of things? The paper itself mentions that research in this region of Iran has been heavily dominated by ceramics.
That is the very polite, very academic way of saying we have far too many reports about pots and not nearly enough about people.
So here are 5,000 pages on different rim shapes from the 5th millennium.
Exactly. And don't get me wrong, that work, that typology, is incredibly important. It builds the timeline. It's the foundation. But it can be very dry. It risks treating the past as just a collection of objects. This study flips the script. It uses the ceramics, yes, but only as a container for the real story.
The real story being the biology.
The biology, the social lives, the grief, the ritual, it puts the people back into the pottery. That's the essence of bioarchaeology.
It focuses on the bodies.
Yes. And by doing that, it brings that invisible majority we talked about at the beginning back into the light. These two babies would have been totally missed by an old-school excavation from, say, the 1950s. They might have been tossed aside as animal bones or just crushed by a shovel without anyone noticing.
It's kind of terrifying to think how much history we probably destroyed just by not looking closely enough.
It is. It's a sobering thought. But the fact that this team, Alarizazadeh, Baranapur, and their colleagues, took the time to do 305 separate measurements on a fragile skeleton that could fit in your hands, that shows a real shift in the discipline. We are finally learning to listen to the quiet parts of the record.
We're learning to listen to the silence.
And in that silence, we find the humanity. We find the mother cooking a meal over her child's grave. We find the family sacrificing a sheep they probably couldn't afford to lose. We find the hope that a simple clay pot can act as a womb and protect a soul.
It makes the past feel incredibly close, incredibly personal.
It does. It stops being history with a capital H, this abstract thing that happened to other people, and it starts being just life.
Yeah.
With all its tragedy and its beauty.
I want to go back to the forensic side for just one second. The paper mentions they used quantitative and qualitative methods. We talked about the calipers, the numbers, but what else did they look at to try and understand these short lives?
Well, they looked for pathology, or in this case, a lack of it. One of the big questions with fetal burials is always, why did they die? Was it a disease that affected the skeleton? Was there a congenital condition, a genetic issue?
And could they tell from these remains?
In this case, even with the fantastic preservation, skeletal analysis has its limits. They didn't find any obvious signs of trauma, like broken bones or massive deformities on the bones themselves.
So was it a violent death?
It doesn't appear to be, no. This suggests the cause of death was likely something related to soft tissue, or perhaps an acute complication during the birthing process, or maybe an infection that just didn't have time to leave a mark on the bone.
Which would be very common.
Incredibly common. And we have to remember, we're talking about a time before antibiotics, before modern obstetrics. The infant mortality rate and the stillbirth rate would have been significantly, tragically higher than it is today. But, and this is the crucial point, the archaeology here proves that just because it was common doesn't mean it wasn't tragic.
That's a really important distinction to make. I think sometimes people have this assumption, oh, ancient people lost babies all the time, so they must have been hardened to it. They surely didn't care as much as we do today.
That is a dangerous myth, and we need to bust it right now. The Chaparabad burials prove that that assumption is garbage. You do not butcher a prized sheep and dig a grave under your kitchen floor for something that doesn't matter. The grief was real. The ritual was necessary.
If anything, maybe the sheer frequency of death might have made the rituals more important, not less.
I think that's absolutely right. If death is always knocking at the door, you develop robust cultural ways to handle it. You create the pota's womb technology to process that loss. It's a mechanism for survival, for emotional and social survival.
We're coming up on the end of our deep dive here, and we've covered the forensic miracle of the 305 measurements. We've talked about the pota's womb. We've covered the cultural crossroads of the Dalma and the Pizdeli peoples.
It's been quite a journey back in time.
It has. But the thing that really sticks with me, the final big idea, is this idea of potential.
Go on.
These babies were pure potential. They hadn't done anything yet. They hadn't farmed a field or made a pot or fought a battle. They had no accomplishments. And yet their community stopped everything to bury them with such specific, meaningful care.
It suggests that for them, human worth wasn't transactional. It wasn't about what you do for the tribe. It was about the fact that you are the tribe. You belong from the moment you are expected.
And that belonging extends beyond death.
It does. And thanks to this incredible study, that belonging extends 6,500 years into the future. We are sitting here talking about them today. We are acknowledging their existence. In a strange way, the time capsule worked.
It took a little while to open, but it worked.
It certainly did.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. It's been a heavy one, but I think a really necessary one.
Absolutely. It's always good to listen to the silence.
We'll see you on the next one. Keep digging. Heliox is produced by Michelle Brucker and Scott Bleakley. It features reviews of emerging research and ideas from leading thinkers, curated under their creative direction with AI assistance for voice, imagery, and composition. Systemic voices and illustrative images of people are representative tools, not depictions of specific individuals. Thanks for listening today. 4 recurring narratives underlie every episode: boundary dissolution, adaptive complexity, embodied knowledge, and quantum-like uncertainty. These aren't just philosophical musings, but frameworks for understanding our modern world. We hope you continue exploring our other episodes, responding to the content, and checking out our related articles at helioxpodcast.substack.com.